welcome everyone to the NSA tonight's webinar on stuttering in academia. We're very excited to have a lot of people register for this and join us tonight. Hi Brad, hi Pam. And thanks for staying up late. This is great, especially late for one of our presenters in Halifax. First, I'm going to make some introductions. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to read some bios, and I'm going to start with my own. My name is Charley Adams. I'm a clinical assistant professor at the University of South Carolina. I should disclose to you that I am the only panelist who does not stutter. I do work with a lot of people who do. I work in communication sciences and disorders. I teach a course on fluency. I work with a lot of patients in the clinic, a lot of college students. I would also like to introduce Leen Choo. Leen is an assistant professor at Georgia State in the Department of Communication Sciences and Disorders. She graduated from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign with a PhD in speech and hearing science and completed her postdoctoral training at the University of Michigan. Her research aims to understand the effects of stuttering on cognitive development in monolinguals and bilinguals, and how specific cognitive factors are involved in the trajectory of the disorder. Leen is what we might call an SLPWS. That's a speech language pathologist who stutters. Next, I'll introduce Jeffrey Brown. Jeff is a scientist. Wait, Leen, why don't you say hello really quick so people know who you are?
Hi, I'm really excited to be here. As you can hear, I stutter, and I come from a family of other people who stutter, including my dad.
Thanks, Leen. And I should add that my father stutters as well. Okay, Jeff is a scientist and educator with a background in neuroscience and biophysics. Currently a postdoc researcher associate at Rosalind Franklin University in North Chicago, Illinois. He also served on the faculty of the University of Illinois College of Medicine at Urbana-Champaign for 4 years. Jeff has stuttered since early childhood. While speaking in front of large groups was at one point unthinkable for him, he now feels most at home at the front of a classroom or lecture hall and is excited to return to a full-time faculty position in the coming years. Although his research doesn't directly deal with neurological bases of stuttering, he's very motivated to serve as a mentor for young adults who stutter, and particularly for undergraduate, graduate, and professional students. You want to say hello, Jeff?
Hi, it's a pleasure to have the chance to speak here tonight. This is the first time that I've had the privilege to speak at an NSA event, and I'd like to thank all of you for coming. I look forward to an interesting conversation.
Great. Okay. Next, we have Scott Brown. Scott is a part-time lecturer at West Virginia University, where he recently finished his PhD in history. He also teaches a print-based correspondence course for another alma mater, Adams State College in Southern Colorado. He teaches an interdisciplinary version of Intro to Western Civilization for West Virginia University's Philosophy Department and U.S. History for ASC. Since he first moved to Morgantown, West Virginia in the fall of 2014, he's been active in the town's NSA chapter. I'd like to say hello, Scott.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I think you accidentally said the wrong last name. That's Scott Thompson, as you can see.
I was going to correct my mistake as soon as you were done.
Oh yeah, no biggie. And want to also say that like in my family, I guess I hit the jackpot. No one else in my family stutters as far as I know.
Great. Well, great to have you with us, Scott. Lastly, I'll introduce Will Webster. Will is a retired academic after having served for 49 years as a faculty member, psychology department chair, director of a School of Communication Sciences and Disorders, dean of a faculty of social sciences, and dean of a faculty of health professions at 4 different Canadian universities, most recently at Dalhousie University in Halifax, Nova Scotia. His research is focused on the neuropsychology of stuttering, and the results of his studies were published mainly between about 1982 and 1985. He also collaborated with speech-language pathologists in the management of stuttering in a clinical context. And in 1989, he co-authored a book entitled Facilitating Fluency: Transfer Strategies for Adult Stuttering Treatment Programs. Will is a person who stutters who, when young, spoke only with great difficulty, but who now has reasonably good control of his stuttering most of the time. Please say hello, Will.
Great. Hello. I really am pleased to be here this evening, and look forward to the discussion that we're going to have with the panel. Just to share family history, I have a father who stuttered, just like you, Aileen.
And like me as well. All right, well, let's get started here. The first topic I want to talk about is that transition that most faculty make from being a student to being a faculty member, and of course, in the context of stuttering. And so I thought I might see if Jeff wanted to go first to talk about that. Jeff?
Sure, I would be happy to, Charlie. So I think relative to the other panelists here, I might be the only participant who's not currently full-time faculty, but I did serve as full-time faculty for 4 years at a medical school, as Charlie mentioned in the introduction. And I think that the single most challenging realization for me when I got the job and I was preparing to teach for the first time was that suddenly things really counted. I certainly had to speak as an undergraduate or as a graduate student, but I felt that, I think somewhat erroneously, whatever sort of imposition my lack of fluency imposed on my audience was not, say, as big a deal as it would be now that I would be teaching and directing a course for hundreds of medical students. And I think that erroneous thinking sort of boiled away pretty quickly after I started in my position. I was, I think, pleasantly surprised to find that not only were my students extremely accepting of the fact that I had a stutter, but that I stuttered, I think, fairly regularly, particularly during my first year of teaching, and that it didn't substantively impact my ability to convey the information that I was teaching, nor to form meaningful relationships with my students. So I was sort of able to settle into this new position of authority, though I would be lying if I said that even to this day, there isn't a part of me that's still sort of wedded to that erroneous thinking that somehow my stutter, my disfluency is placing a burden on my audience. But I know in my more rational moments that that's not actually the case.
Great, thanks, Jeff.
Sure.
Let's see. How about you, Scott? Would you like to go next? Transitioning from student to faculty.
Sure. It looks like I'm actually the one to never have a full-time faculty position. Most of my experiences I'll be talking about come from being a teaching assistant and then a graduate instructor teaching my own classes throughout my grad school years. Like what I found like first when I made the jump from being an undergraduate to a grad student, teaching undergrads, and then when I made the jump from being a TA to being someone who was in charge of my own class, but both of those were they were they were pretty daunting for me because of the responsibility placed on me, and I was there've been like my thoughts on my stutter have widely fluctuated throughout my life, but during those two moments were some of the some of the lowest points. Like I suddenly got like really self-conscious, talking in front of all these, people, and it being, me being responsible, for this, classroom, and that caused my stutter to become more, severe, and notably, like when I first became a graduate instructor, I had, after a successful experience with speech therapy, I had become fluent, like almost completely for about 2 years. But then, well, like all the nerves that came with teaching this course, and I'm sure comps had something to do with it too. That was weighing down on me. I relapsed, and so I had to like relearn how to how to do my techniques, for when I was stuttering, kind of like you, Jeff. I've noticed, overwhelmingly students don't really mind all that much. Though what kind of stung me first was whenever I get course evaluations. This is rare, but whenever I get course evaluations where a student complains about it, like says that they weren't able to understand me, well, I like that kind of makes me feel bad, and like I've been deficient as a teacher, but ever since then I've started disclosing to students. We might talk more about that later. That is a seem to help them. So like in you making this transition, I've seen a lot of, at least with my stutter, a lot of correlation between you know diving into the deep end of something and having social anxiety exacerbate my speech, which then prompted me to try to improve my confidence with going forward.
Great, Scott. Thank you. I want to take a minute to say that we've got a lot of NSA first timers in here, which is super exciting. I didn't quite expect that tonight. So welcome to your tribe. Next, why don't we hear from Will about that transition from college and doctoral student to faculty member?
I'll tell you, it's been a long time since I made that transition, more than a half century ago. But there are a couple of things that do stand out in my mind. One is that one of the experiences I had was really what was to describe by Jeff. And that is that I found that the students were very, very understanding and supportive, and I was never made to feel bad. And now, one of the things that I found early on that was really critical for me in terms of being as fluent as I could be, and that was to be really well prepared. And so I spent a lot of time preparing lectures, preparing both the content as well as how I was going to present them, and so perhaps that also helped the students to be more forgiving than they might have been otherwise. But certainly, as you spoke, Jeff, I was thinking back that my experience was very much the same as yours, and I've always found that in the years that followed, so things were not, in fact, as bad as I thought that they might end up being when I first started.
Wonderful. Thank you, Will. And that leaves Eileen. Talk to us about your transition. And you had an interesting, you had a few stops along the way.
I did have a few stops. I was a marine biologist before I went back to school. Before I went back to grad school, I also taught high school biology as well. I would say the biggest concern I have with the shift, and I'm going to tell you the shift has been great. I love being a faculty member. I love being able to do my own research. I love teaching, and I even love service. I would say that the biggest challenge for me, well, the biggest concern I had was how am I going to interview for these jobs if I'm going to be this fluent. I did, as Will said, I did make sure that I was really prepared, but I thought, I'm going to go there and it's going to be a 2-day thing. I'm going to be so tired, and we all know the more tired you get, the more disfluent you are. And I thought, how am I going to get these jobs? And even after I got my first job, and then I moved from Cal State, East Bay to Georgia State, and I remember thinking, how am I going to nail this? And I remember that my mentors telling me that your fluency should be the least of your concern at this point, and they were absolutely right. Because if I'm at a job and they think that my fluency is an issue, then maybe that's not the right job for me. But it also could be that it's easy for me to say because I'm in a CSD field, right? I'm in a field where I think that people should accommodate me if I stutter, and that people should understand that I stutter. And it may be more difficult if you're not in CSD, but I will tell you that was the major concern that I've had. And going back to the past comments about students, I'll tell you also, students have been great. The one comment I've had was that there was one person who told me the reason why I receive excellent student evaluations is because I stutter. And I reject that because I think because I stutter, it makes it even harder, right? I would say that anytime, anything deviates from what people would call being typical, right? We all have biases against things that are different. So I would say, as a person who stutters, if you do well, that is an achievement for us. So I would say that all the fears that I had about my fluency, those really should not have been my concern at all, because my worst fears did not come true.
That's great. Thank you, Eileen. You mentioned interviews, and interviewing is a super stressful experience for people who stutter. which is a great opportunity for me to highlight the NSA's We Stutter at Work movement, which has an awful lot of wonderful resources for people who have jobs, for people who are looking for jobs, including practice interviews you can do through the NSA. So I encourage everyone to check out the website if you are looking for a job or looking for help at work. Great. Eileen, why don't we go back down the list? You've talked a little bit about your early career already, and so I will also add, for this phase, let's talk about early career, but let's also talk about teaching in the classroom and stuttering. And so you have taught a couple of different populations, so you can maybe compare and contrast those for us.
So I would say the toughest population, the toughest audience I've had are the people in high school. They are a tough crowd. And I taught at an all boys Catholic school. In the first semester that I taught there, I had a fight break out during my biology lab, right? These two kids I saw there, one was like, I'm going to slap you and you're going to slap me. And I'm like, I'm going to let that go, right? And I shouldn't have let that go because it escalated into a fight. And these two kids were punching in class and there was blood. And I was standing there thinking, should I yell at them? Should I get between them? Am I going to get hit? But so I'm going to tell you that high schoolers are the toughest audience that I face. I face no such thing during my graduate class now. I would say it's one of the things that I look forward to. I teach the neuroscience class and I teach the fluency class. And I enjoy both of those classes. But my fluency class especially, every year that I teach a fluency class, I have students come up to me and they say, I stutter and I want to be an SLP and I don't know if my fluency is going to impede, my ability to conduct therapy. And I'm glad that I'm there, that I'm a resource for them. And I tell them it's not, fluency gives you, stuttering gives you a lot of things that I think that will help you be a great SLP. So yeah, I'm really excited to teach the fluency class every year. And did I answer that question, or was there another question in there?
Well, you did, and I'm going to throw another question back at you, but I want to comment that you're not only a resource for students who stutter, you're also a wonderful example for them. Absolutely. And so let me just take a minute to say that some of the best speech pathologists I know stutter, and it gives you a legitimacy, especially working with stuttering, that those of us who don't stutter don't have. And so that's why I had to start a chapter of the National Stuttering Association 20 years ago, so that they would understand that. So, quick question: talk about disclosure, and then we'll move down the line.
So, sorry, is it? Are you asking me?
Yes.
Okay. So I definitely did in the classes that I teach. I definitely disclose. And I don't use any therapy techniques at all. I do not use any techniques at all because I think it is important for students in my class to be comfortable, like seeing someone like me stutter and seeing someone like me being in charge of the class, because I really want them to know that it doesn't matter if you stutter. We all have challenges in our lives, and stuttering just happens to be mine, right? But I really want them to realize that stuttering shouldn't hold them back. So I do disclose, but I do not disclose all of the time, right? So I serve on a lot of committees, and I don't disclose sometimes because I know that someone will say, I also stutter, when I know that they don't. They have typical disfluencies. They don't actually stutter. And I really don't have the time at that point to be like, I'm going to take 10 minutes and tell you why you don't stutter. You have typical disfluency. So I don't disclose all of the time, but I disclose whenever I have an opportunity to tell them more about stuttering. The other thing that I want to add, I'm actually in my early career stage now. I hope to, I will go up I will go up in a few years. And I would say that at this point, stuttering really is the least of the challenge that I have, right? The challenge that I have now is how do I balance research? How do I balance teaching? How do I balance service? And how do I balance my own personal life? So stuttering really is the least of the concerns that I have. But at the same time, it is what I do every day. I eat, sleep, think stuttering because this is what I do. So stuttering has been, I would say, something that has given me a purpose and a direction. So it's not all bad.
That's great. Thanks, Eileen. I think many of the people here tonight have been told by others, oh yeah, I stutter too sometimes, just like what you report. Let's bounce back to Will. Let's talk about your experiences in the classroom and do you and how do you disclose your stuttering, or did you?
I always found it very important to
Are you there, Will?
I am. Are you able to hear me?
Yep, we got you.
Okay, good. Yeah, I certainly have always found it that it's important to disclose. I don't make a big deal out of it. But I just people some may block occasionally. That's just the way I am, and all fine. I do the same thing as I'm presenting at a conference. I just want to get it out there so that if I do stutter and if I do block, and certainly I do, I don't want to then sort of have that put me off, as if I am suddenly revealing something about myself. So the other place where I have done that, and I think when I look back, I think this was important to me when I was just getting started, and that was to spend some time to get to know my colleagues well. And to, if they're interested, we can talk about stuttering. But again, I think it's important not to make a big deal about it. But I found it helpful to talk occasionally with my department chair or with my dean, just so that they would have some understanding as to what this is about. And if there were students who complained, again, they would have some understanding and perspective on this. But again, it's been a long time since I was in that early stage of my career. But I think it is helpful to get to know colleagues. I found it helpful as well if I was in. Well, we are going to, I guess, talk about faculty meetings a little later. So maybe I'll hold off on that comment that I was going to make until that time.
What I would like you to talk about briefly, Will, is I know that you, in many ways, are very heavy on preparation.
Yes.
When you go into a speaking situation, would you talk about that for a minute?
Yeah, I just find it very hard to simultaneously formulate what I want to say with how I'm going to say it. And it's not that I use a lot of techniques, although certainly I through my work with speech language pathologists, I've become quite familiar with PFSP techniques. But if I want to try and use those, I want to keep in mind, if I want to be able to use, full breath and gentle onsets, but at the same time trying to formulate what I want to say, I just find it a problem. So I just like to be well prepared, and not just in terms of general topics I want to cover, but kind of sequences. I find that if there's three things that I want to say, and I find it helpful to write down for myself what those are, so that if I'm on point one, I don't feel I've got to rush to get through it, so I can get on to 2 and 3 before I forget what those are. So I can just take my time with one, and I can do whatever I have to do to make that point. And again, it gives me time to formulate how I'm going to say things as well as what I'm going to say, and then I move on to point 2 and on to point 3. So, and maybe this is partly idiosyncratic. I think part of what my issue that I deal with sort of cognitively as well is the whole area of sequencing. That I get. Sometimes my sequence is sort of confused a little bit. And so I find if I write down what I want to say and how I'm going to do it, it just makes it much easier.
Terrific. Thank you, Will. Let's see, Jeffrey, why don't you speak a little bit about early career and maybe focus a little bit on stuttering in the classroom?
Sure. Well, like Eileen, I would also consider myself to be in the early phase of my career. One of the things that Will has said now a few times certainly resonates with me, and that has to do with preparation, not only as an end unto itself. Obviously, if you're, if you're teaching in the classroom, you want to be adequately prepared. But I find the more prepared I am, and moreover, the more confident that I am, which of course goes hand in hand with preparation, the more I'm almost able to settle into a role. It's not as if I'm consciously pretending as if I'm an actor, but I feel as if the more authoritatively I can settle into the role of teacher, of lecturer, the more fluent I tend to become. And I saw this certainly throughout the first several years of my position at the medical school where I previously worked. I found my fluency improving year after year. I mean, notwithstanding a less fluent day here or there. I would also echo what I think that Will mentioned about the fact that sometimes in front of the classroom or in front of the lecture hall, it's sometimes difficult for me to make use of the fluency shaping tools that I've been privileged to learn over the years. There's almost a sense that there's this constant time gun, and I know the whole point of fluency shaping, or one of the major sort of underlying premises, is that you, as the person who stutters, should take what time you need. But it's consistently difficult for me, even though I get through whatever momentary disfluencies I happen to deal with. It's consistently difficult for me to be able to use those fluency shaping tools in a reliable manner. And I'd say that that extends outside of the classroom to my interactions with colleagues and friends. Sometimes I'm more successful in mustering those tools than in other cases, and with other people. I hope that adequately answers your question, Charlie.
It does. Thank you. Thank you very much. And that leaves. We'll bounce over to Scott. If you would speak about when you first entered the classroom and how you managed the classroom in terms of stuttering.
Yeah, that's so. I as I briefly you mentioned before, ever since I got those course evaluations, I started disclosing, and what I do is I'll do it at the very beginning of the semester. I'll yeah, during, when we do our introductions, I try to make it clear to the students that, if you have trouble understanding me because of this, uh, uh, you know, I won't be offended if you ask for a clarification, like either, in writing or in the, you know, uh, classroom, and I think that helps, that helps you lessen the, tension little bit. And like what I, have been liking about hearing from the others, hear about their, experiences is, you know, I think that, before I got involved in the NSA in any way, like I think, people have been, too awkward to like talk to me about my stutter. And then likewise, I've, been usually so self-conscious about it that I didn't want them to, but like, I've, for the longest time, I did always want to, know, how much of this is a barrier or an attribute, or somewhere in between, or neutral. Yeah, and so, I am in, courage that it doesn't seem to, you know you know matter that much, the overwhelming majority of students, and like also like, colleagues, and when I was a grad student, you have faculty like never, you know brought it up, you know, either, but anyway, I
Scott, that's a great transition to our next topic. So the next topic on our list was going to be, so we've been talking about interacting with students. Now let's talk about interacting with colleagues, other faculty members, whether it's in a formal meeting or informally. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Like a well, like a, so like it hasn't, been, brought up, that, much, though, what I've, I've, appreciated though that like, uh, you know colleagues and supervisors, they've, I could, tell they've been, patient with, you know me, and I like that my, dissertation advisor, like, he was able to distinguish when I was just stuttering normally and when I was stuttering more because I was really nervous, and he needed to, come in there and, coach me, a bit, which I think, yeah, yeah, helped, me, feel, uh, better, about it. I did, like what stood out to me a little, like earlier, in my academic, career is, I had an undergraduate advisor tell me that, don't worry about, your stutter, because like I was thinking, oh, there's no way I can make it in academia, so it's, pointless to then, go on and, get a, PhD, and, and eventually become a faculty member at a university. But that, advisor, helped me calm those worries. But then, at my first graduate institution, a professor told me that, this might be used as a tiebreaker against me, like during, like if I'm interviewing for a job. And then I've also heard that the ADA protects stuttering, or like affirmative action policies do. It's kind of unclear, but just the experience of being with faculty and students, talking with them later on has helped me learn that it doesn't seem to be that big of a deal.
That's great, and I'm glad you mentioned mentors, because mentors are huge. And as I will kick it over to, I think I'm going to go back to Will really quickly. If you would talk about interacting with other faculty members, and if you want to say anything about mentorship, that's great too. I imagine you've been on both sides of that equation.
Yes, I have. I think that I think when I look at the whole range of experiences I've had at the university, I think that participating in faculty meetings has sometimes been the most challenging things to do, because often there's a lot of heat in these meetings. There are contentious issues. People jump in, people interrupt. People talk fast, and they expect you to talk fast, and they expect you to jump in quickly. And I found these very frustrating at times, and it's hard to know what to do about it. Although occasionally, if this became sort of habitual in some committee, I might just have a quiet chat with the chair of the committee, just to say, look, I just want you to know that I cannot jump in as fast as others, and I would find it very helpful if you might ask me if I have a comment to make, so that I can then get started sort of slowly, rather than feeling that I have to rush, because then if I rush, then again, I have the same problem of trying to do both formulating what I want to say as well as how to say it. So that certainly has been one thing that has helped. It's also helped, I think, if I know what the issues are that are going to be discussed in a meeting, to go in prepared, to try to make my comments early in the meeting, so that there's not the same opportunity for a lot of anxiety to begin to develop. So that sometimes, the question might be, okay, we have this particular issue. Is there someone who would like to comment on it? I very quickly put my hand up and start things off. And that way I sort of feel I can control the conversation a bit better than I can if others have got going and side issues have come up. And again, people are talking faster and so forth. Sorry, Charlie, what was the other question you asked?
Just about mentorship.
Oh yeah, certainly over the years I've had a good number of students who have been quite aware that I stutter, and they've come by to talk with me about this. And I always have time to talk with someone who stutters. It's not a matter of come back some other time. It's a matter of I'll drop everything, because it's very difficult, I know, for that person to come to see me, particularly when I was in the role of a dean, and often they would have been encouraged by their professor, and I don't want to discourage other such referrals. And it's interesting. One of the times when this sometimes comes up, and I mentioned this, Charlie, to you in a note I sent you, one of the more challenging things that I as a dean have had to do was to read the names at convocation. So the students come up, they give you a card, and you have to then say their name. For many names, it's fine, but it does present challenges, particularly because I suspect, like all of you, you have certain sounds that are particularly problematic for you. And I'm always so pleased when I'm through the M's, because also when I start, I have to sort of address the audience by saying Mr. Chancellor, I have the honor to present, so forth, and so that sometimes would be quite a long pause I would actually start the presentation, but then once I got through that one, that helped me with when the other M's came, the M's for the students who were actually graduating. I won't go. There's funny stories I could tell you, but I won't because we don't have that much time. But anyways, to come back to and also at the end of the convocation, that's why I got into this. It was not unusual for a student to come up to me or a family member of a graduate student or a graduating student coming up to me and sort of commenting on the fact that here I am up there as a person who stutters, and I must be very courageous to be up there. And I sort of feel that this is great. If I could be an inspiration to somebody, great.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Eileen, I know that you said that when you already told us a little bit about why you don't disclose in certain faculty meetings, and I get that. Is there anything else you'd like to share about interacting with other colleagues and or about mentorship?
So similar to Will, M's are really difficult for me. They're tough. So every semester that I teach a fluency class, I'll have students come up to me and say that they stutter and they don't know if they're going to pass clinic. They don't know if they will do well. But I think seeing someone else who stutters really helps, and I also connect them to other people who stutter as well. The one thing I'll say about interaction with other faculty members is that I've had really meaningful conversations about stuttering, about life that came about because of the fact that I stutter. So I think it's really helped. But I think in every environment, we'll find that there are people who have biases, right? And because of the fact that I stutter, they may think certain things about me. And the way that I deal with that is I think, if you have an issue with me, the fact that I stutter, it's not my problem, it's yours, because you probably have, biases against other groups and other people as well. And the other thing that I want to add is, I am a person of color and I am female. So I definitely think there's an intersection between all of these three, right? So I think that some of the perceptions that people have of me isn't just because of the fact that I stutter, but because of the fact I stutter and I'm female and I'm also a person of color as well. And I love it when I get to prove them wrong. But the way that I see it is, if you have an issue with me, it's not me, it's you. You have to deal with that. I think a lot of times we go into interactions, being people who stutter, and we always think that the burden of the interaction is with us. We have to carry all that weight. But I think what I found over the years is that you as my conversation partner, you should be just as involved, and you should carry the weight or the burden of this conversation as well. So I expect my conversation partners to then adapt to me as much as I accommodate them. And if they don't, then the problem isn't mine, it is theirs.
That's great insight, Eileen. To stutter is to be vulnerable, and to be vulnerable is to invite others to be vulnerable as well. And that can lead to some very meaningful conversations, as you say. Okay, Jeffrey, it's your turn. Interactions with colleagues.
Sure. Let me start off just by saying, Charley, that what you just said, Eileen, is a message that I am still, at this point in my life, continuing to try to internalize. That as much as I continue to feel some misplaced sense of guilt about burdening whoever I happen to be speaking with, that any conversation by its very nature is reciprocal, and that in reality, the vast majority of people are willing to let you take your time and to do whatever it is you need to do to bounce back from disfluencies. And the minority of people who are unwilling to grant you that accommodation are not worth your time of day, anyways. And I can say that, and I can believe it fully. In the moment, sometimes it's still difficult for me to sort of realize that as I'm speaking to somebody else. With respect to dealing with other faculty members, and in my current position, where I'm a postdoctoral associate with my colleagues, there's a good amount of variability in terms of how fluent I am with individual people on any given day. And I know that certainly doesn't make me in any way unique as a person who stutters. I think all of us experience those sorts of fluctuations. I tend to be fairly open nowadays. And I know that I didn't touch upon this in my last response, but I tend to disclose as often as I feel I need to, which is not to say in every single situation. Sometimes, if I'm dealing with somebody on a temporary basis and my fluency happens to be fairly high, it's just not something that occurs to me. But with the people who I work most closely, I'll typically self-disclose fairly early on in the professional relationship, whether or not I happen to go on to be disfluent with those particular people or not. I'll share sort of one interesting one interesting interaction. So I work in a research group of 4 people consisting of my mentor, a research assistant professor, and then a graduate student. And all 4 of them are well aware of the fact that I stutter. It turns out that the research assistant professor in my group also happens to be a person who stutters. And this is not something that we talked about openly until around a good year into my time working in this research group. And the camaraderie that I've formed with him has been particularly empowering. But what's interesting is that I am more disfluent with him than I am with just about any of my other work colleagues. And I wish I knew why that was. I think at some level there's a level of comfort that I'm almost sort of taking my shields down, to use a Star Trek analogy. And of course, this is nothing that I do consciously. I don't think any of us whose fluency varies from moment to moment, context to context, person to person has any conscious control over why that variation exists. And if I'm being honest, sometimes the disfluency that I experience with this particular colleague can be exhausting, and I think he's expressed the same to me. But it's one of the few instances in my professional life where I have interacted very closely with someone who intimately understands what it's like to live with this on a daily basis. And while we certainly share any number of perspectives and experiences in common, there are any number of ways, I think, in which our experiences and our outlooks diverge. So that for me has been a real source of empowerment.
Jeff, that's great that you have that, and thanks for the Star Trek reference. I'm a Trekkie myself. I'm going to go over to Carl and ask if we've got some questions from the chat. If you want to toss some of those out for us.
Hey, Charlie, we do. So I've got a few questions from the chat. The first one is from Joshua Bodman, and this one was directed to Scott. This was going back to when you were speaking earlier about the course evals at the end of your classes. Joshua asked, has any dean or provost ever followed up with you regarding any negative course evaluations?
Oh yeah, that and no one has no one brought it up, which fed what I you mentioned earlier about it being a mystery as to what extent this is a barrier or an attribute and I don't even know, like at least at WVU, I don't know what any of the higher ups do about certain course of evaluations, but still a good question.
Awesome, thank you. Jill Clayton put in the chat that they want to be a teacher, and their question was, and I think this can be for the whole panel, what stuttering speech therapy have you had in the past, and what techniques or fluency strategies have you found most helpful to improve communication skills and teaching effectiveness in the classroom?
Well, I can say that Eileen's strategy is to use no strategy at all. I remember that. Will's strategy is to be extremely prepared, and he has several tools he can use if he needs to, or was. Who else wants to jump in on that? Jeff.
Can I add that, it's not that I do not think that stuttering therapy is great. I think it's great, and I think that we should all use strategies that you want to use, that you are comfortable with. It just so happens for me, I happen to be in the CSB field, right? I happen to be working with future SLPs, and I think it is really important for them to be comfortable with stuttering. So I show them what stuttering is like. So I don't use any technique at all. But then when I talk about therapy in class, when I teach them therapy in class, then I do use, I do show them what therapy can do, and I use some of those techniques so that they can see the difference between using therapy and not. But most of the time I choose not to, because I think this is my true self. And this just happens to be a personal preference for me. But I certainly understand that it's not for everyone.
Thank you. That's terrific.
And then I wanted to add something. Yes. So when I did speech therapy, I got taught pullouts, cancellations, and easy onsets. What I've kind of found a way to I don't know if it's the right way to put it, but I've kind of found ways to merge some of them by as I call it, speaking in cursive, meaning I try to exaggerate, accentuate every word, syllable, sound, and doing so as carefully as I can, and then as I do right now, once I inevitably stutter on a word, I'm able to guide my way through what I'm trying to say. I always like to do that when I'm publicly speaking, either in the classroom or at presentations.
Thank you. Uh, Will or Jeff, do you guys want to chime in on techniques?
So I would add to that that I think that everyone who stutters stutters a little bit differently, and I also recognize that not everyone has access to speech therapy. Um, Assuming that you are able to access speech therapy, I think you'll probably find that different strategies work with different degrees of effectiveness. Um, in the chat, I wanted to repeat something that I just read. Um, Holly Nover said, "I like to think the goal of speech therapy for people who stutter is to learn uh, effective communication, not learn how to be fluent." And I think that that's absolutely true. I don't think that it's productive to go into speech therapy assuming that you're going to be cured. Um, but I I certainly feel as if I am more effectively able to manage the mechanics of my stutter and also sort of psychologically frame what it is to stutter more um, more constructively than I would have if you're um, looking to go into teaching particularly. I would also repeat something that I mentioned before, which has worked well for me, which is to almost pretend as if you're playing a role. Um, I know that some people who stutter report that their stutter seems to diminish when they're role playing or when they're singing, when they're speaking in groups of people. And so my own strategy over time, and it's oftentimes not entirely conscious, is to emote a little bit more, almost change my manner of speaking without in any way um, attempting to be someone who I'm not. And that seems to boost my fluency um, somewhat, irrespective of whatever fluency shaping tools I am or am not able to use in any particular moment. And as I said before, for me, it's sort of a grab bag.
That's great. That's great. Will, I wanted to give you a shot at this as well. Anything you'd like to add about use of techniques?
I guess that over the years, my speech has generally has improved, partly due to, I think, focusing a lot kind of on social scripts to try to make some social interactions more automatic so I don't have to think too much about them. But like Jeff, I've sometimes found that exaggerating really helps. And I don't know quite what it is, but it seems to flow better. And I guess the techniques that I have, and they're not all that well honed, but I use them occasionally when I need them. Like for example, if I'm at convocation and have to read a name, and I will maybe see that this might be a problem, and so that's when I would use them to sort of stretch that sound to have gentle onset, or certainly for me making sure that I've got some air in my lungs is important, and so I try to remember it about full breath, and so I use them that way. But I don't use them all. In fact, I don't even use them 5% of the time. But they are there to help me when I need them. A lot of the time, I don't worry if I stutter. As Leen said, frankly, this isn't my problem. It's the listener's problem, and I just and my interest is in communication and not fluency, as I guess Holly was saying. But I do have sort of this toolkit that I can use on occasion if I need to. And there are certain days which are bad days. If I feel that I'm coming down with a cold, often like sort of 2 days later, I'll come down with a cold, but I can tell that I'm going to because I'm very disfluent for a couple of days ahead of time for whatever reason. I have no idea quite if it's due to changes in my respiratory system or whatever. But on those days, I will exaggerate more. I will make sure that I've got some breath in my lungs. And I hate to say it, but those are days when I may avoid going into various social situations as well. I'll figure that phone call can wait for a couple of days, and then until I just feel that until I feel that I am more in control of my speech. Then.
Terrific. All right, Carl, more questions for us?
You know it. We had one from Rachel that I think Holly responded to in the chat. This was for anyone who is an SLP who stutters. Rachel asked, if so, how would be the best way to tell your clients or patients that you stutter? I think Holly responded to that, but if there's anyone else on the panel who would like to add perspective.
I'd actually like to sort of follow up on that with my own question. I think you had said Leen, that you are an SLP. Do you find that if you presently work with clients, or at some point you have, whether clients feel more comfortable with you because you're a fellow person who stutters, and whether that makes your job easier than you suppose it might be if you weren't. And I suppose that, Charlie, you would be an example of someone who, if you're not an SLP, you certainly work with people who stutter at an intimate level. Is it harder for you as someone who doesn't stutter to be able to reach people who do stutter because you don't have that firsthand experience?
The short answer is yes. Again, that's why I started a chapter of the NSA 20 years ago. But I think having worked with so many over the years, I think I'm generally able to convey some expertise at that first meeting to instill a little bit of confidence. But yes, Eileen, I'm sure you've been in that situation where, as someone who stutters yourself and being a speech pathologist, you feel valued and validated.
So I'll say that right now, all I'm doing is research, teaching, and service. And I would say that it goes both ways, right? Because sometimes people think the fact that you stutter is great, you understand who they are, and then sometimes people think you stutter. If you can't help yourself, how can you help me, right? So I think it certainly goes both ways, and I don't think there is a right way to disclose. I think, when the point you're right, I think you just disclose the fact that you stutter, and I think the outcome, is what will is I'm not sure how to put this, but what you can do as an SLP, I guess your clients want to see if you're worth your salt, right? If that's the right saying. So I mean, I think at the end of the day, I don't think there is a right or wrong way to disclose, but I'll tell you that just last week, one of my grad students who has a pediatric client, she said that she disclosed to the child that she also stutters, and she said that the child just glowed, right, knowing that there was someone who understands who he is, and someone who is helping to treat him. I think that totally made a difference.
Great answer. What's next, Carl?
Next, we've got a question from Daniel Fleischman. Daniel says that they are transitioning from graduate school to their first real job as a mental health therapist. I have to schedule first-time appointments and then have sessions. I am usually worried that they will drop off, and I usually attribute them not wanting therapy to my stutter. While I know that this is not true, I'm wondering if it is almost a universal hard thing for people who stutter to begin new jobs and to not give up on the dream job?
Who would like to field that?
So I want to say that you should never give up on your dream job. And I think that, and if your dream job at place A isn't the right one, you have another dream job at place B, right? Your stuttering should not be the thing that impedes you from getting your dream job. Now, that being said, I have to say, I am in CSD. This is what I want to do: eat, drink, sleep, think, stuttering the whole day. So I'm at my dream job now. But it is easy for me because I am in a CSD field where I think people should understand the fact that I stutter and should accommodate me. But I really truly believe that stuttering is not something that should stop us. And I think that that stuttering has imparted on us a lot of good qualities, and I think we have insights from it that people who don't stutter do not have. So I really don't think that you should give up on your dream job. If you do, it should be because of something else, not because of the fact that you stutter.
That was brilliant. That was brilliant. I think we should go to the next question because I think there's a lot of questions. Is that correct, Carl?
That was the last one that I noted from the chat.
Okay.
So I guess we can open it up to folks if you want to take yourselves off mute, if folks have any questions that they may want to ask.
Can I also add something? I want to say that I love all these stories that I'm hearing now, and I'm interested in the stories of people who stutter in the workplace. In fact, right now I am collecting data, looking at the experiences of people who stutter in the workplace, because I think some of the experiences that we have are great, and unfortunately some of the experiences that we have aren't so great. And I think understanding the experiences that we have, I think we can then ask for organizational change, make organizational change if we know what the experiences of people who stutter are. So if you would like to share your stories with me, please reach out to me. And I'm going to write my email in the chat box. And please reach out. I want to know what your story of stuttering in the workplace is.
Terrific.
Awesome. Thank you for that offer, Eileen. I'm sure a lot of folks will take you up on that. So it's really exciting to see.
Who else has a question for our panel?
I have a question. I just wanted to thank all of our panelists for being here tonight. Really loved hearing all of your input, and I thought all of you had a lot of really valuable things to say. One of the questions I have is actually for Eileen or actually Eileen and Charley, since you both work in the field of communication science and disorders. That's not a field that I am currently in. However, surprising as it was for me to hear this, and even still when I hear it now every so often, I hear that there's a bias in that field towards people who stutter getting into that field and working as SLPs and maybe even being able to teach in that field as well. The bias is that you, as a person who stutter, can't be effective as an SLP or in that field as a person who stutters. And I know that to us who stutter, we think that's absolutely ridiculous, and I had thought that as well when I first started hearing that. but I have heard that from people who are in graduate school to be SLPs, and when they when they meet with their advisors or various faculty members, they are told that, well, I don't really think this is a good idea for you because you're a person who stutters. I just wanted to ask you both: have either of you ever encountered that in the past? And if so, what are the ways that what have you done to overcome that and to get to where you are now?
Eileen, do you want to go first?
Sure. So thank you for that question, John. I think that's a really important question for future as SLPs, and I'll tell you that certainly has not been my experience at all. I would say that in at least in my department and in the previous departments that I've been in, the fact that I stutter and I teach a fluency class, and I work with our fluency grad with our grad students, I would say that has been viewed as a plus. So that really hasn't been my experience at all. But yes, in the clinic, our students who stutter, they do go through therapy themselves, right? And that certainly really isn't about the fact that they stutter, right? But I think it is that they have to achieve a level of fluency where they can effectively carry out therapy. But that being said, if you stutter, it doesn't preclude you from being an SLP, because this is something we can all work on. And as I said, in my personal experience, that has certainly not been the case. I have not had anyone tell me, because of the fact that I stutter, that I cannot be in this field, that I cannot be an effective teacher, that I cannot be an effective researcher. So that certainly has not been my the experience that I've had.
I'd like to add to that a little bit. I know that there are a lot of people in attendance tonight who stutter, who are already faculty members, successful faculty members. I know because many of them are friends and colleagues. I know that there are probably a lot of people here who are thinking about a career in academia and wondering if they can do it. I think that I also know that most of the people on the panel at some point in their career have had some sense of self-doubt as to whether or not they themselves should even be in academia. And so I think we've all learned to appreciate tonight that, yes, absolutely, that's a great place for people who stutter. I think we've learned tonight, like Eileen said earlier, never give up on your dream job, whatever that is. If it's academia, great. Whatever it is, don't let stuttering be the thing that keeps you from that. I know that I'm thrilled to hear about your research, Eileen, and I hope that you get a lot of great information from that. I just had a few closing thoughts, and if more questions come in, that's great. But if not, I'm just gonna close out with a few thoughts. Some of these are things I heard tonight. Some of these are things I learned tonight. There's certainly a correlation between confidence and fluency, and we know that preparation can correlate with confidence as well. I know we learned that people who stutter make great teachers. We heard stuttering's not my problem, it's yours, you the listener. And someone put in the chat, stuttering is not my problem, it's society's. I really like seeing that, and there's truth in that. I think we all understand now that effective communication is not the same as fluency. You can be a very effective communicator who stutters quite a bit. And as people who stutter on faculty, members of the panel are very important role models. And I want to thank them for that capacity, because that's extremely important. Being in a place where you're exposed to so many young people over the course of a career makes that's a great place for someone who stutters to be, so that more people will come to understand more about stuttering. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank my panel, Jeff, Eileen, Scott, and Will. I've really enjoyed working with you tonight. I want to thank everybody who came out tonight. As you learned in the chat, this talk will be available in about a week. If you registered for this talk, you'll get an email telling you where it is, where you can find that. I want to remind everybody once more about the wonderful resources on the NSA website. NSA website is westutter.org. It's very easy to find the We Stutter at Work section of that website. If you get there, you'll find a lot of wonderful resources. And I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight.